Story 1. He was standing in the rain, but the ground was dry around him. This happened to me in 2017. I was living in the outskirts of Spokane, Washington, in a small rental cabin my cousin owned. It was meant to be a temporary arrangement after I left my previous job and needed a place to reset. The place sat on the edge of a sparsely populated neighborhood, gravel roads, few streetlights, and thick pine trees pressing in from all sides. I'd gotten used to the isolation, maybe even started to like it. I worked remotely doing contract coding work, and on rainy nights I liked to take my car out and drive for a while. Nothing far, just enough to listen to the sound of the rain on the roof to clear my head. That night was one of those. It had been raining steadily since late afternoon. Not a storm, just one of those long, steady Pacific Northwest rains. My driveway was slushed with puddles, and the wipers made that familiar rhythmic squeak every few seconds. I had the heat on low and a mug of coffee in the cup holder. The roads were empty, like they usually were around that time, somewhere near 11 p.m. I'd taken a back route that curved around a small wooded valley. It was one of my favorite drives. Dips and slopes with almost no traffic, no stoplights, and enough tree coverage to make the rain feel like a cocoon. About 10 minutes into the drive, I saw something in the distance through the rain-flecked windshield. A shape, standing near the side of the road. At first I thought it was a deer, then maybe a person walking. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't moving, just standing there, almost perfectly still. I slowed down, and that's when something didn't make sense. The rain was heavy enough that water was streaming down the glass, and the mist from my tires was kicking up a haze. But this man, this figure, the ground around him was bone dry. At first, I assumed it was an illusion. Maybe there was a tree overhead, or a canopy I couldn't see. But as I passed him, crawling now at under 10 miles per hour, I leaned toward the passenger window and looked. There were no trees, just open gravel road, and that figure standing in the rain. Except the rain wasn't hitting him. Not the way it should have. The hood of his coat was dry, the shoulders of his jacket dry, the ground beneath his boots undisturbed. I blinked, rubbed the inside of the windshield with the back of my hand, looked again. Still dry. The figure didn't look at me, didn't move. His hands were at his sides. I kept driving. About 30 seconds later, I realized I hadn't breathed properly since passing him. I pulled over, rolled down my window, listened. Just rain. No footsteps, no sounds of movement. I sat there for another minute, trying to rationalize it. Could have been something to do with my headlights, or the angle, or oil on the road. But even as I tried to explain it to myself, I couldn't shake what I'd seen. Water falling on every inch of ground except one. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I thought of how still he'd been. Not waiting, not walking, just being there. Like he knew he didn't belong in that rain. I didn't tell anyone the next day. I knew how it sounded, but I couldn't let it go either. By nightfall, I found myself back in the car. Same road, same rain. Something inside me needed to look again, to prove to myself it was just a strange angle or a trick of perception. The rain was lighter this time, more of a mist. The clouds were low and gray, and the pine trees held still, like they were listening. I drove slow. Slower than I usually do. Every corner made my stomach tense. But the road was empty, until it wasn't. He was there again. Same posture, same coat, same distance from the road. I braked gently, rolled the car forward until I was parallel with him. This time, he turned. I don't remember deciding to stop. I just did. The man faced my car. His hood fell back slightly, and I could see part of his face. Middle-aged, pale, lips pressed together. Then he started to speak, but I couldn't hear anything. Thunder cracked, long and low, right as his mouth moved. Like the sound had been timed to drown him out. He didn't stop. His lips moved again, slowly, deliberately. Then he raised one hand, almost like a wave. Then another boom of thunder. I turned off the engine, cracked the window. Silence now, but nothing came from him. And then suddenly, A tap on the window beside me. I jerked toward it. Nothing. No one. Only now the street lamp that had lit the road was off. Not flickering, just off. I turned back toward the man. Gone. No footsteps. No sign of movement. Just the sound of rain falling again, and that impossible sense of wrongness pressing against my chest. I started the car and left. I don't remember the rest of the drive home. Only the silence. The kind that stretches too long, like something waiting to be heard. I didn't go back the next night, but I did start locking my doors again. Even during the day, a few weeks passed. I managed to convince myself it was stress, or something else entirely. But then I found a thread. It was a forum post, buried in a thread about strange sightings in rural areas. A user mentioned something called hydrophobic apparitions. The term caught my eye. The theory was obscure, fringe even for the paranormal circles, stories of people or things that appear during storms but are never wet, not touched by rain. They avoid water, the post said, because water remembers. That line stuck with me. I read more. Accounts of travelers seeing people in the rain whose reflections didn't ripple puddles. Stories of figures dry as bone beneath thunderclouds. One person claimed their grandfather used to say some things couldn't cross moving water, not because they were afraid, but because if the rain touched them, it would carry something away. I went back one more time, middle of the afternoon. Clear sky. I parked where I remembered the figure standing. Got out, walked to the shoulder. Nothing unusual. No impressions, no disturbance in the gravel. But then a little further, a patch of road darker than the rest, like it had been wet, even though it hadn't rained in over 24 hours. I crouched down. It wasn't just a patch, it was shaped, like a footprint. One single boot print angled toward the trees. No others. And just beyond that, a streak in the dirt, like something had turned, pointing back toward the direction I'd come from, back toward my house. That night, I left the porch light on. And when I woke up, the bulb was dead. Not smashed, not unscrewed, just dead. I replaced it the next morning. It flickered once, then went out. I haven't taken that road since. But every time it rains, I find myself watching the puddles, not for who's in them, but for who isn't. Story 2. I thought it was just rain, until the rhythm matched my breathing. This happened to me in the fall of 2018. I was living alone for the first time, top floor of a converted duplex in a small college town in Oregon. I had just started my grad program in music theory and rented the place sight unseen off a university housing board. The location was perfect, 10 minutes from campus, walking distance to a corner store, and quiet. The building itself was old, the kind of old where the walls hum at night and the floors creak no matter how slowly you step. I liked it though. The wood felt lived in. The windows faced a dense row of trees, and the sound of rain was constant that season. Oregon doesn't do light showers. I'm sensitive to sound. It's what I've studied most of my adult life. I can name a pitch with my eyes closed, and I've always been able to tell when something's off, when a hum isn't coming from where it should. That gift is probably why I noticed the tapping before I should have. It was 3 weeks into the semester. I was up late working on a paper, headphones in, lo-fi jazz on loop. It had been raining since early evening. Not hard, but steady. That hypnotic kind of patter that makes it easy to forget time. Around 1 a.m., I pulled my headphones off to let my ears breathe. That's when I heard it, a tapping sound. At first, I thought it was part of the rain, just droplets against the window, but it wasn't coming from the windows. It was coming from the wall. Behind me, 3 taps, then a pause, 3 more. I sat still, tried to locate it more precisely. It wasn't loud, just soft enough to make me lean closer. Then it stopped. I waited. Rain still falling, wind low and slow in the trees. I turned my chair, got up, and pressed my hand to the wall. Nothing. I chalked it up to the building settling or some plumbing trick. That kind of thing was normal in old houses. I went to bed about an hour later. The next night, it came back. This time, while I was brushing my teeth. 3 taps, pause, 3 again. The timing was strange, not mechanical, not random, almost deliberate. I stood there listening, and without meaning to, I realized something. It matched my breathing. Inhale, tap, 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 pause, exhale, tap, tap, tap. It wasn't exactly in sync, but it was close, too close. I held my breath, nothing. I let it out, tap, tap, tap. I dropped the toothbrush in the sink, stood there listening, testing. For the next 2 minutes, I experimented. I slowed my breath. The taps slowed too. I tried quick, shallow breathing. The taps responded. Always just slightly behind, like an echo, not a perfect mirror, more like something trying to keep up. The air felt suddenly thick, like I wasn't alone. That night, I slept with a white noise app playing. It was the only way I could close my eyes. But even with the sound masking the silence, I kept thinking, something was learning me, listening, measuring. A few days after the tapping started, I began hearing something else. A drip. Very faint. Not the kitchen sink, not the bathroom. It was above me, ceiling level. At first, I assumed it was a leak. Old houses get those. I checked the attic hatch in the hallway and grabbed a flashlight. Nothing visible, no stains, no wet insulation. Still, the sound continued, 1 drop at a time, always in the same spot, directly above my bed. At 2:40 a.m. every night, I moved my bed slightly to the left, slept awkwardly, angled to avoid whatever might fall. I placed a metal cup under the drip location, just in case. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting. 2:40 a.m. Drip, drip. I listened, counted 27 drops. Then silence. In the morning the cup was dry, not a drop inside. I examined the ceiling again. Still no water, no cracks, nothing. The next night, same thing. Drip, drip. I left the cup out, went to sleep eventually. When I woke up, my pillow was damp. Not soaked, not wet from sweat, just cold and slightly damp, like it had absorbed something from the air. I picked it up and saw something else. There was a second cup beside the first, same metal style, but it wasn't mine. Identical in shape, slightly shinier, and it was empty. I stood in the silence for a long time, unsure what to do. I don't have guests. I don't even lock my front door with a key, just the knob and the deadbolt from inside. I checked both, still locked. I checked the windows, secure. I washed both cups, put them in the kitchen, didn't sleep that night. The tapping didn't return, but the drip did, always 2:40 a.m. I stopped placing the cup, but the second one kept appearing, never with water, always empty, like someone else was trying to prove something or participate. I finally told someone, a professor I trusted, Dr. Alicia Verge. She specialized in auditory hallucinations, temporal sound studies, and other obscure areas of sound perception. I asked to speak privately, told her parts of the story, left out the tapping, just focused on the phantom leak. To my surprise, she didn't laugh. Instead, she asked if I'd recorded anything. I hadn't. That night, I set up my laptop with a directional mic, aimed at the ceiling. I used Pro Audio software and set it to record from 2:30 to 3 hours a.m. The next morning, I reviewed the file. It took a while to find. Amid the static and rain, the pattern was buried deep, fainter than I'd thought. 26 seconds in, drip. 4 seconds, drip. But when I isolated the waveform, zoomed into the signal's spectral profile, I saw something else. Low pulses, too low to be a drop, too regular to be noise. I slowed it down. What I found felt impossible. It was a rhythm, consistent, not like a clock, like a heartbeat, 60 BPM, slightly irregular, like breath under tension, like mine. I layered my own resting heart recording on top. It aligned perfectly. I ran it again with different samples. The match remained. The sound wasn't just dripping, it was echoing, mimicking. Then 37 seconds in, a second sound, faint whisper level. I boosted the EQ in the 6K, 8K range, filtered everything else. Then heard it, a whisper. Short, just 2 words. Keep breathing. Silence. Then again, lower, closer. I like the pattern. I played it again. My mouth went dry. I slammed the laptop shut and didn't open the file again. The next night, I slept at a friend's place. Didn't tell them why. Just said I was between renters. When I came back 3 days later, everything was where I left it, except the second cup. It was now on my nightstand, with a note inside, just a scrap of yellow paper, and a word I wish I hadn't read: sink. I moved out the next day. Didn't finish the lease. I never found water damage, never had a roof leak. But sometimes in new apartments, when it rains just right, I hear it again. Not tapping, not dripping, just a faint beat. Following, waiting, matching. And sometimes I still catch myself breathing in threes. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. Story 3. The rain stopped, but only for my street. This happened in 2020. I'd just moved back to my childhood home after my father passed. The house sat at the end of a small cul-de-sac in northern Pennsylvania, bordered by a narrow strip of woods and a small reservoir. It was the kind of neighborhood where people waved out of habit more than recognition. Every house was built in the early 90s, identical layouts, same uneven sidewalks, same cracked street lamp at the bend. I didn't want to be there, not really. But I couldn't afford to sell it yet. Not until probate cleared and the taxes were figured out. The house had this stillness I couldn't shake, like it had been waiting too patiently. My father died alone there, in the living room. The TV was still on when the neighbor found him. I moved in during late September, and by mid-October, the rains came. Thunderstorms had always been common in that part of the state, sharp, fast, and loud. But that week, it rained for 5 straight days, the kind of rain that blurred the edges of everything. I kept to myself, took freelance work, cooked basic meals, and tried to sleep. The nights were the hardest. The house had a hollow to it that never echoed properly. On the 4th night, I noticed something strange. It was around 3 a.m. I'd fallen asleep on the couch with the window cracked open. I woke up suddenly, not to a sound, but to the absence of one. The rain had stopped, but only on my street. I sat up and listened. The sound of rain was still there, still steady, still close. But when I looked out the window, the driveway was dry, perfectly dry. I stepped out onto the porch. The air smelled wet, fresh, but there were no drops, no puddles on the concrete, no rivulets running down the siding. I stepped further out. The trees bordering the backyard shimmered, soaked in the distance. I could see the shimmer of droplets under the neighbor's floodlight, but the edge of my lawn, bone dry. The storm hadn't stopped. It had skipped. It was raining everywhere but where I stood. The sound filled the air but had no source, like the storm existed in stereo, invisible and misaligned. I looked up. Clouds still churned above me, but they didn't move, like the storm was being held at bay by something precise. The silence of my street wasn't peaceful. It was surgical, too clean, like someone had drawn a line in the atmosphere, and I was on the wrong side of it. I went back inside and locked the door. But even through the walls, I could still hear the storm, just not feel it. I barely slept that night. The next morning I checked the news, the weather, even local radar archives. Nothing unusual. But I kept thinking, why did the storm stop only for my street? And who or what was deciding the boundary? That night I stayed up on purpose. I didn't want to wake up to silence again. So I made coffee at 2:30 a.m. and waited. And right on time, at 3:00, the rain returned, but again only in sound. My street stayed dry, no mist, no condensation, just the sterile hum of a storm I couldn't touch. I stepped outside again. The world beyond the cul-de-sac was wet. The shimmer was unmistakable. Distant roads glossed with runoff, the reflection of taillights in puddles. But my own driveway? Untouched. I checked my neighbors' houses, all of them dark, except one, the Mullers. They were an older couple who'd lived there as long as I could remember. Mr. Muller always kept the porch light on, a small amber bulb that buzzed quietly after midnight, but tonight it was flickering, not randomly. I counted. 3 short blinks, 1 long. Pause. 3 short. Again. 2 long. It repeated. I grabbed my phone and looked up Morse code. The translation came through broken, but I got fragments. She isn't. Then again. She isn't alone. My stomach turned. I looked down at my phone. The screen said 3:09 a.m., exactly the time my wife died. The year before, sudden cardiac arrest, in her sleep. No warning, no last words. I'd never told anyone, not even my father. The number was burned into me, and now it was back. I walked across the street to the Mullers. The porch was silent. The light had stopped blinking. When I knocked, no one answered. I pressed my ear to the door, heard the soft creak of a floorboard, but no one came. The air around their porch was still dry, like the boundary of the rain had stopped here too, isolated, curated. I backed away. As I crossed back to my house, every light on the street went out. Simultaneously, even the blinking amber bulb. I checked my phone again. Still 3:09 a.m. No signal, just a black screen. And my own reflection, fractured by a spiderweb crack that hadn't been there before. In the days that followed, I barely left the house. I kept every blind shut, every light on. But the rain continued, outside my reach, always audible, never visible. I started looking into weather anomalies, government databases, climate forums, found nothing useful, until I stumbled across a paper from the early 2000s, unpublished, written by a defunded academic named Dr. Laird. It wasn't scientific in the traditional sense, more like psychogeographical theory. He described localized emotional weather fields, areas where trauma left a kind of atmospheric residue. He called them echo zones, places where loss had been so sudden or violent that reality itself absorbed the shape of it. Under specific conditions, especially storms, those zones could become active. They didn't change the past. They replayed it, adjusted the world around it, not for closure, but to preserve something or someone. I didn't know what to make of it until the 5th night. The sky had turned a bruised gray by 8 p.m. By midnight, the storm returned, and with it, the dry zone. But this time I saw something else. A figure, standing at the edge of the cul-de-sac, just beyond where the rain began. I couldn't make out their face, but they were facing me, not moving, like they were waiting for me to notice. I stepped outside. The figure didn't flinch. Neither did the rain. I took a step forward, then another, my feet still dry, but the sound of the storm grew louder, closer. Then the wind shifted, cold, sharp, and in it, I heard a voice, not loud, just behind my ear, one word, my wife's voice. "Don't." Then softer, "Don't look back." I froze, turned toward the house. All the lights were off, even though I hadn't touched a switch. The figure was gone. The rain still visible in the distance, still unreachable. I went inside, turned on every lamp, paced the living room until sunrise. When I stepped outside that morning, the street was soaked, puddles everywhere, as if nothing had ever been dry. I checked the porch, 2 sets of footprints, mine and another pair, smaller, side by side, facing away, as if we'd both stood there listening. I never saw the storm return after that. But the porch light across the street, it still flickers. Only at 3:09 a.m., always in threes, always in rhythm. And sometimes, when I forget myself, I still hear the rain, inside the silence where it doesn't belong.